Good afternoon. It's the House Appropriations Committee. It is still Wednesday, December 17th, 2025. It's just after 2:30. And we are going to change direction for a moment and take up a bill. Remember those? We're going to look at S60, and we have the chair of House Ag and Forest, and I can't remember the whole name of it, Rep. Durfee, and then we'll have Michael Brady from Lynch Council talk to us, and then we have a very brief little amendment that I think we're going to try to hear about as well. So I think, Dave, you wanted to go first, so introduce yourself and tell us about the bill. Thanks.
Hi, David Durfee, Chair of the House Agriculture, Food Resiliency, and Forestry Committee. And
I knew you'd have it.
It's a mouthful. Yep. Nice to see you all, and thanks for having me in. So I'll give a brief overview of the bill, and then I know Mike is here from Ledge Council too, and we'll walk through it if that's your preference. And then we took this bill up at some point last session. I'm gonna have trouble remembering exactly. It's a Senate bill. It's at S60. We made a couple of pretty significant changes to it that I will point out, basically having to do with the addition of adding the forestry sector to the intended beneficiaries of the grant program that the bill sets up. We, just to back up a little bit, in the 2024 off session, you will probably remember there was a great deal of precipitation in parts of the state, following a similar 2023 where there was a great deal of precipitation in parts of the state that had a pretty severe impact on farmers in many parts of Vermont. Several groups of farmers came together during 2024 while we were at home and began working on a proposal that ultimately became S60, and it's to set up a grant program, a relief program that would provide funding not only from the state potentially, but from private sources, and would be administered at the state level, but would have a board that was separate from the any of the state agencies. And the intention would be to try and turn around as quickly as possible requests that came in for funding in a weather-related emergency. So the bill sets up a board, it establishes a fund, it talks about what sort of circumstances, what sort of weather-related circumstances might qualify for a farmer or a logger who or someone in forestry operations who has experienced losses related to the weather, and what sort of benefit they might receive. I've set some parameters around that. As I mentioned, it came from the Senate with only agriculture, only farmers, and we have been aware of the impact of weather, different kinds of weather conditions on not only the agriculture part of our working landscape, but the forestry side of it as well. When the ground is very wet, it's difficult for loggers to move their equipment. In fact, it can be impossible for loggers to move their equipment into the woods. They have to follow strict rules, and they really only can be doing the work that they need to do when the ground is frozen or when it's dry. And when we had rains like we had in 23 and 24, it put a severe crimp in their ability to operate. So that's sort of the high level overview of what we're doing here. Maybe I'll pause and see if there are questions And then if there aren't, I could turn it over to Legislative Council.
Great. Any questions so far? And I think we're good so far, Dave. And so hang on and we'll have Michael Grady come up and
I'll
give us
stand
all
by.
the legal stuff. Thank you.
So good afternoon. This is Michael Grady with Legislative Council. I am going to share my screen and show you a side-by-side of S60 as it passed the House and S60 as proposed for amendment by the House Committee on Agriculture, Resiliency and Forestry. All right, can you all see that?
Yeah.
So as Chair Durfee just referenced, S60 is a bill to establish a permanent special fund to assist farmers and forestry operations who have suffered damages from weather. It would be located, administered by the Agency of Agriculture, but it would have a review board that would process the applications for assistance. The bill starts out with the findings section referencing the reasons why this special fund is necessary to provide assistance to farmers and forestry operations. You all remember the flooding of 2023 and 2024, how many existing state and federal programs that are designed to support farms and forestry are difficult to access. They're not equitably distributed to small and medium scale farmers, and they don't currently meet the needs of Vermont farmers and forestry operations. Now, as Chair Durfee referenced, one of the big differences between S60 as passed the Senate and the House Agriculture proposal is the addition of forestry operations as an eligible entity underneath the assistance program. So you will see and forestry operations added throughout, and I'm not going to reference that each time it is. Another important part of the findings is referencing how federal crop insurance is not necessarily a great benefit program for small scale or diversified farming. It's usually based on larger scale farming or commodity farming, and therefore it's not always available to smaller farmers in Vermont. And then the state should establish this permanent funding support program to maintain the viability of farms and forestry operations in Vermont in order to ensure the food security, climate resilience of the rural economy, environmental health, and continuously invest in farms and forestry operations in a way that makes them more resilient, to provide a source of relief funds permanently for those farmers and forestry operations impacted by climate emergencies and extreme weather. Then you come to the definition section. This subchapter is located in that chapter of law where programs such as the Working Lands Board and Vermonters Feeding Vermonters is located. As may happen between sessions, when you take up a bill in one session but don't pass it until the next, there are things that happen. Like the effective date of this bill needs to change. Another thing that can happen is that some other program might be codified into sections where you wanted this codified, which has happened.
Oh.
The Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program that you established last year was codified in subchapter 4 of this chapter. We were going to deal with that in the statutory revision, but you can deal with it now with an amendment if you would like.
I think we may have a couple of things to amend, so
Okay.
why don't we add that to, that sounds like a technical change that
Sure.
you will make it whatever it's supposed to be.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So key definition is an eligible weather condition. This is the trigger that allows for the assistance or for a farmer or forestry operation to seek assistance. It's any of the following weather conditions that are found to be closely correlated with an agricultural or forest operation income loss: wind, precipitation, heat, freeze, fire, hail, drought, or any other severe weather condition impacting ag or forestry operations as determined by the review board. Then you,
One second. So does this create the review board later on?
it does.
Okay, thank you.
Then there's a definition of farm, which is fairly intuitive. Then there's a definition of this review board, which you will see in 4634 in a few minutes. The definition of farming is that definition of farming under the required agricultural practices. It is not your backyard person that's growing or gardening, etc. They have to have a threshold number of animals and or be making a certain amount of income from their land. So it's not just anyone who lost some Brussels sprouts. Then there is a definition of forestry operation. This is one I'm going to read out to you because it's not one you see every day. Forestry operation means activities related to the management of forests, including a timber harvest, pruning, planting, reforestation, pest, disease and invasive species control, wildlife habitat management, and fertilization. So that is the type of activity that would be eligible for assistance under the program. And then you see the creation of that special fund, Farm and Forestry Operations Security Special Fund. It's created to be administered by the Agency of Agriculture. It shall consist of funds transferred by the General Assembly. Last year in the Senate passed appropriations, but I think there was $1 million that was appropriated for this, but it did not survive. It did not survive final reconciliation. But the fund could also accept funds from public and private sources. And there are other programs like this around the country and other states. And some of those programs take in money from the USDA and then push it out through programs like this. So the Agency of Agriculture would be able to seek federal funds or other public funds to help capitalize this program.
I have a question here from Wayne.
So on the federal fund part, we already have all kinds of insurance and stuff now running through the Department of Agriculture. So this would place some of that money that's already being administered by ag into this.
So you will see later on that you only qualify for this program for uninsured, unreimbursed funds. So if you already have crop insurance or you're somehow eligible for assistance underneath another federal or state program, you're not eligible for this.
Well, my thinking was that I understand that makes sense. My thinking was that if the federal government is already providing money to the Department of Agriculture, and now that's going to go into this pot, and this pot's going to have a board, it's just going to have some extra administrative charges. Are we duplicating or are we going to diminish the amount that might go out?
No, I mean, you're right. I mean, the federal government gives the Agency of Agriculture a lot of money right now, but those are in already specific programs with dedicated requirements and or uses.
So there'd be a new program.
This is a new program. If there was going to be if there were going to be federal money, it'd be new federal money.
Okay. Thank you.
The fund has to ensure language accessibility for those who are not English speakers, and all balances in the fund shall be carried forward and remain part of the fund. Then you get to the assistance, and it is not a grant. It was a grant in the Senate, but it is not a grant in the House Agriculture proposal because for input from the Agency of Agriculture, and I recollect from JFO as well, that you don't need to have grants, that they can move this money through payments, and payments are easier to administer and faster to administer than the grant requirements for state agencies. So switch from a grant to a payment, and I want to be clear about that.
Usually grants would have some mechanism for making sure the work was done.
Right, the administrative bulletin, whatever, 5, I think it is, has all those conditions for grants, and you have to meet all of them. You don't push out all the money at first. You retain like 80 to 90%. You push out 80 to 90% and retain 10 to 20 to ensure that it's the money is used.
So going from grants to payments, we still retain that kind of.
Well, there's still going to be accountability, but it's not going to have to be the same structured and very technical compliance with the administrative bulletin 5. Should I move on?
Yes.
Okay. You will see that the Secretary of Ag, after consultation with the review board, shall award these payments from the fund persons owning farms and forestry operations that have incurred financial losses or expenses due to eligible weather conditions. Again, due to eligible weather conditions, moisture, flood, heat, fire, etc. Payments from the fund shall be an amount that reimburses a farm or forestry operation for up to 50% of their non-reimbursed, uninsured, or otherwise uncovered losses. So you're not getting double payment due to the eligible weather conditions, up to a maximum of 5% of what's unencumbered in the fund, or $150,000 is the max payment that can come out of this fund.
Do we have any sense of what the size of losses typically are?
Well, that's a great question, and you will see later on towards the end of the Senate passed version, one of the things that the Senate wanted to do and that the advocates proposed at the beginning of this bill is to try to quantify what the demand is going to be, to go out and look at an average loss due to weather conditions over the past 3 years, and then to recommend that amount of money to be deposited into the fund. There was an assumption of what that would have been. It was a large number. And so because of constraints, you know better than I, the process moved off of that number and ultimately to the million in the Senate passed version, and whatever will happen in reconciliation.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, an apple farmer is different than a dairy farmer is, and it could, and the size and all that, it could be all over the place. Tom?
Well, I'm moving ahead just only very slightly to section 3, which does talk about replacement of lost income from destroyed crops. And so that is, I don't know, what time of year, if you lose your apple crops to a freeze in April, how do you quantify that, unless you're using past crop numbers to, I mean, I understand that this is going to be not subjective, but it's really going to be based on historical analysis of what farmers are able to produce, as opposed to saying you lost 500 chickens, average weight 6 pounds, that should be 50 bucks, whatever the numbers are.
Right. And you're going to see how that concern, that kind of reality plays out in this bill, because there were income requirements, including providing your Schedule F as a requirement for application. If you're harmed in May, you don't have your Schedule F for the year. Your Schedule F from last year is irrelevant to your losses at that point. So you will see that there's going to be the requirement to provide documentation of income loss, but it's not going to be tied to something like your tax return. What that documentation will be, that will be up to the secretary in administering the program.
Just one more, it's changing gears, going back to the conditions. I noticed in the findings, there's a focus on climate. You use the word climate, and I'm more than aware of the current federal administration is full of, they're taking away climate as a concept, or climate change as a concept. Is this something we're going to have to pay attention to if we're, in order to not create a target for a potential USDA program or something like that, if this is what this current federal administration deigns to be, I don't know, anti-American in their view, because climate change doesn't exist, then will that affect how we write this, or the policy committee writes this?
You can never predict the future, and you can never predict any administration, let alone this administration. So I can't say that it would somehow, just because the word climate is used in the bill, that it would somehow lead to disqualification or lack of eligibility. I mean, if you are concerned about that, there does need to be an amendment, and that could, I think it's only used once or twice.
I mean, just in the findings,
Yeah.
it just was about I mean, number one, other climate fueled disasters, and the administration has made it clear that they don't believe that there are climate fueled disasters, so.
There is language in, that was proposed last year, and it did not pass, but it will likely pass this year, even though I can't predict the future. That says if there is a federal repeal or amendment or something that affects the ability of a state agency to implement a statutory or regulatorily required program, that the change will not be effectively honored, the federal change will not be effectively honored, and the state program will go on so that it can continue to provide the policy level service that you required of it under your state legislation. Not knowing what the Trump administration would do, I'm not sure that would necessarily guarantee that this program would continue, but it would help. So we are trying to, advocates, state agencies are trying to get language in that would prevent the total disruption of the program because of a decision by the administration.
And because you also, I mean, you have an automatic language that says if something changes, that the rest, that doesn't affect climate, forget climate, the use of this, but just the idea of something happens that unplugs a piece of statute that it can continue. This is similar, but not the same.
It's not the same. You're thinking of the severability clause, which is in Title I, that says whenever a court finds that there's a aspect of a law that's unconstitutional or otherwise unlawful, that the rest of that program, the rest of that law can continue severed from the poison part. And but this is not really the same as that.
Okay, Jonathan Wayne.
Yes, just, I'm not sure if this ended up being a question here, we're just, pretty close conversation with one of our reps in the House here, who owns a sizable farm, about the kinds of loss that may happen at some point during a year here. The recovery from that may not just be from that particular year, but it may extend into like the next year in some circumstances.
Sure, I mean,
and
but
you got to give me and I want to misquote what he was telling me here all here today here, but the recovery for that may not be like, getting ready for the next year, but perhaps beyond that, depending on the scale, I guess, and perhaps that's something the board would have to.
well, I think Representative Brady's amendment is going to address this to an extent as well. That farmer is going to have to manage when they apply.
Right.
Right? So when their losses are the max, or when they need the assistance. And so there's nothing in here that dictates that when they can apply, they just have to show that they suffered those losses from eligible weather conditions that the secretary then verifies. And so there's some flexibility for the farmer, but you're right. The losses might continue into 1 or 2 growing seasons. And so that is, there's no restriction on your ability to apply. Representative Grady wants to look at, see how much assistance you got over the prior 5 years is something that the review board will take into account for their award. And that's the best I can answer your
Sure,
question.
yeah.
Couple things, I'll start in reverse order. I'm going to take care of your climate issues, and the climate's the process. The things we're dealing with, your high winds, extreme heat, these are all weather conditions.
Yes.
So you might simply just replace the word climate with weather and you solve the problem.
Yeah, but I mean, weather's already referenced. I think it says weather or climate, just used activities. So
If you just remove the word and it's the other, because we're dealing with individual processes, not individual things that are happening. These are factors, not the process.
Yeah.
Shape it yourself. So you can do it, and it's not in conflict with anything else that's been going on in terms of climate. The other issue I see was, especially in forest related, if you had major wind throw events going on, someone's gonna have to assess the magnitude of that and get an estimated cost for those things. I could see that as being a costly thing to do. So how are those kind of costs going to be paid for?
Well, great question. I'm going to skip ahead to what the applicant needs to provide. And just one by, sorry. So they, at the bottom of page 5 of the side by side, they had the Secretary of Ag needs to develop a streamlined application for applicants for the award. And that has to include a brief description of the damage that occurred, an attestation of eligible weather condition or event, an estimate of losses, and a year-end report of farm or forestry operation income and expenses. So the forestry operation doesn't necessarily need to have that true and attested valuation of the loss because of the wind throw. They just have to have an estimate. And then it's up to the review board with the secretary to determine the validity of those claims.
Do you think or has agriculture testified that told you that they expected to incur additional administrative costs or technical costs? Because if they have to verify this or to do that, then there could be any magnitude or any knowledge of that.
You will see at the bottom of page 6, one of the things that your committee on agriculture is recommending is that the agency be allowed to use up to $67,500 for the purposes of administering the program. So they did expect for some administrative costs, and the House Committee on Agriculture addressed that in their amendment.
As Chair Durfee texted me while this conversation was going on, just in terms of losses, you may recall that the Secretary of Ag, Tibbetts asked people that there was a survey they were asking farmers to fill out because of the drought this summer. And so the information that they collected was 17 million in farm losses from the drought this year. So just to give us a sense of.
So this board is being set up. Obviously, we got 17 million, we got $1 million here. We very likely will frequently in a situation where we don't have enough money to reimburse.
We're never going to have enough money to reimburse everybody for their losses.
So that board will buffer us against the complaints of those that don't get any reimbursement.
So why don't we finish the bill?
The board only operates as long as it has money to operate in any fiscal year. So going back to the payments, the secretary has to verify the occurrence of an eligible weather condition. They can use information such as that from NOAA or from any other federal or state certified weather sources. And then you will see the type of losses that are reimbursable by a payment, include wages, lost income, debt payments, cost of replanting, feed, infrastructure, equipment repair and replacement, repair of farm roads or logging roads, an inability to access harvested timber due to flooding or other weather conditions. As Chair Durfee noted, if it's very wet in the woods, the forestry operator can't get their equipment in there to remove the timber, and the timber, some of it is at risk of rot. And once it's rotten, it can't be processed. Again, the secretary develops that streamlined application. We already looked at that. I referenced earlier on the top of page 6 of the side-by-side of that, the Senate had that submission of your Schedule F. There's no Schedule F requirement in the House Ag proposal, but a year-end report of forestry operation income and expenses is required. Then you'll see the application can be made at any time and the secretary may only close the application process upon award of all appropriated funds. So everything in that fund is appropriated or dedicated, the program stops. Application for the award shall be processed in the order received, but you can't be clever and just put in an inadequate application and try to get yourself first in line. And that's it.
You're cheating.
It has to be an administratively complete application. All administratively complete applications are evaluated by the review board in 15 days. And this is the turnaround that Chair Durfee was referencing, is something that the advocates really believe is necessary to serve the needs of the farmers and forestry operators, because sometimes they are at the precipice of continuing their business. And so they're looking to turn these applications around in 15 days. The review board recommends or not whether the secretary issues a payment. And if the review board recommends an award, the secretary shall issue that award within 15 days following the date of the review board's recommendations. There is that money there for administrative purposes of the Agency of Ag. And then you get to the creation of the special fund, which I know you all enjoy.
Yes, I think we have a question before we get there.
The chair asked me to look at the agriculture's in my portfolio, and so the chair asked me to look into this and interview, the stakeholders and the department, and just the department can testify for itself, but I just wanted to point out they feel like the 67,000 is low, that they're going to need, while their budget has doubled from grants from the government, they have not really been given enough staff to manage them technically, and this is something that they want us to consider, but they can testify to that as well. Mike, the other question I have is, yesterday we heard testimony again from Dale about the nursing home emergency fund. Is there any DNA that's crossing that? Is there any similarity between the way this is structured and the way that the Dale nursing, the 20 million or $14.5 million they talked about yesterday, that's as a fund where if a nursing home was in trouble, they could apply for these funds and have to undergo a forensic audit about how much they really needed it, or is this kind of been created through? I mean, there was a committee, right? There was an emergency emergency committee or some sort, or task force.
There were advocates really that brought this forward with consultation with the agency. I wouldn't say that there was a formal committee of any kind. I think that the advocates put together a group to develop this because they saw the need. They to the 23 and 24 and the failures and failings of some of the farms and forestry operations. They and the failure of the federal government to address those. They saw a need at the state level for this program. How similar it is to the Dale program, I don't know. I once went into Senate Finance to back up Jen Carvey on the healthcare bill, and they were speaking a different language that I didn't understand. And so I try, I don't. It's not my universe.
But I think this is along the same kind of lines.
The concept of what it's trying to do is, I'd be curious as perhaps to dive down someone's rabbit hole to say, did this work? Is this, did that one, the way is it structured? Is there anything, it's more of a, not curiosity, but just it's precedent. And it'd be interesting to see if there's any similarities so that it's easier for us to understand or explain.
So I look at this like BGAP. You told ACCD to set up BGAP, you gave them money. You didn't put a lot of structure around it. This has a lot more structure than what you directed BGAP to do. But it's there for that emergency, you know, when it happens. And as you were seeing year to year, those emergencies, those eligible weather losses are occurring year to year. It's not like got to that specific exigent situation. There's these exigent situations year to year in the farming forestry operation.
Oh, sure. I want to go back to the part of the decision of making the decision about the payment, the 15-day period. Does the board need to say yes or no at the end of that 15-day period? Or could they keep something in suspense and work on some others and say, yes, these are more important. This one's important, but not quite so important, and I'm just going to hold on to it and see if we've got enough money at the end, and then we could give money to number 3.
The way I read the language, and the way I believe it's intended, is that that application needs to be processed within 15 days with a yes or a no.
So they would have to decide right then whether it's critical enough to do something about number 3, and then they go on to number 4, number 5, number 6.
It's not a waiting. There's no priority points.
Right, but it's first come, first served.
First come,
in
first
terms
served.
of what's coming in the door. Right.
Which could also, just stretching that out a little bit, could mean, if you're really good at, if you have the capacity in your shop somehow to spin that out fast.
Get your paperwork.
Yeah, and if you're the single person who's, you know, trying to find a checkbook, you know, it's not gonna be the same. So there's an potentially inequitable situation that's being created. That may not be true. I mean, maybe they all looked at that. We're not the policy committee, but
I think most farmers will tell you for any benefit program, you have that dynamic.
okay.
You have those farms that have capacity, that have staff, that might even have an accountant on staff.
Yeah.
That can do that work quickly, and there's the smaller farms that don't. And part of this is to address that inequity, because the larger farms, commodity-based, they're not gonna $150,000
Yeah.
drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Their cornfields are millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so they probably won't be looking for this program. They probably will go to their crop insurance or some other program.
Well, it sounds like it was discussed.
I
It sounds like this was discussed and,
think it's kind of an underlying foundational basis for this program.
okay. Okay, thanks, Wayne.
It's my, see, I'm from Franklin County. A lot of farms, a lot of forestry stuff, right? So I obviously support those things. My worry is that since it's a small program, since it's first come, first served, and like you say, the little guy, the smallest operation who might be hurt the worst, might be the most in need, might have the least capacity to be able to apply for it. And since we don't have a criteria in there that would give any preference to any needs-based criteria in there, it just concerns me that this might not actually do a lot of good and could cause some consternation amongst the people who don't get it.
But they're already, they're not explicit, but they're implied conditions, unreimbursed, uninsured, right? Uncompensated in any other way. Your large farm should be with a cornfield that they need is gonna be insured. And they can seek reimbursement through other programs as well, like dairy margin coverage. And so to say that there's no acknowledgement of the smaller farm needing that priority, I think it's basically built into the eligibility of the program.
Go ahead,
I
John.
just want to add, if it's not already in here, and I think the agencies are pretty good about trying to let folks know about these kinds of things, whatever it might be, BGAP or whatever here when disaster strikes here. But I think, once this moves through the, channels here, it becomes, final, in legislation here for this, and allows the agency to kind of move forward here. And the whole communication, educational pieces like really important. I think a lot of our smaller towns, for example, got kind of a little flat, for example, I know what to do here. And I think we responded the best we can, but I think the agency just needs to be encouraged to be way proactive about this. So those that have like the larger, umbrella protections here would know about them, and those who don't would also be aware of that.
And there are the
Should
advocates
things come up.
that brought this
Yeah.
bill forward. I mean, they are here today.
That's right.
They're going to be informing their members and others about this program as well. So, I think, when you're hurting and you need money, somebody says there's a program, I think they'll get that education and information out there. And the agency also has all of its resources for communicating, the monthly newsletter, the emails, et cetera. Like, if you're on their list, they try to inform you.
Yeah.
And then you have the advocates who will educate their members as well.
Okay, let's continue, please.
So you get the special fund. It's created, and for administrative purposes at the Agency of Ag. The Secretary of Ag is the chair. Commissioner of Parks and Parks is added as a member or designee because the House Ag Committee is adding forestry operation. State Chief Recovery Officer designee, representative of 3 ag organizations who can demonstrate expertise in dealing with all types and sizes of farms in Vermont. Especially through the grant or assistance programs to farmers who have received relief funding, appointed by the Secretary of Ag, to forestry operators, appointed by the Commissioner of Parks and Parks, which was added by your Ag Committee. Then there was language about terms because of some of these designated subdivisions need to change as well as part of an amendment. But basically, this provides for staggered terms for members. And if there's a conflict, say some of the farmers on the board want to apply or have family members who are applying, there's an opportunity for the Secretary of Ag to appoint an alternate member to maintain a quorum of the board to review an application and recommend whether payment should be awarded. The board has some powers. They review all of the applications and recommend to the secretary who should receive assistance. They annually report to you on the financial losses that from eligible weather conditions averaged over the previous 3 calendar years. In order for the fund to adjust and address the evolution of the need for this program, they will recommend changes to the program and its application process and eligibility. And then they get to elect officers or subcommittees. They have the quorum, the majority. The non-public members get per diem compensation. And then you get to the effective date, which needs to change. It was July 1, 2025, and that there be a recommendation to your House clerk to change the title of the bill to an act relating to establishing a fund for our operation and security special fund, provide payments to farm losses due to weather conditions.
Oh, Mike, is there a fiscal memo for this?
I don't recall one, and I'm looking at James.
Yeah.
It's one of those most recent amendments. But
Okay.
there was disclosed the most recent version,
Sounds-
ag in last section.
Well, that's the same thing.
That's,
This is the one from.
yeah, the one on the right is the House Ag.
Okay, yeah.
If you could just check into what there's, and secondly, I don't see the $1 million in here anywhere.
So the $1 million, as happens when you put appropriations in standalone bills, they get stripped out by certain committees.
No, we haven't done that yet. Have we do that?
But the Senate Appropriations Committee did. They stripped out the specific appropriation in the bills introduced Well, it wasn't as a specific appropriation, it was that language I told you about earlier about developing a report about 3-year average losses. But then they included, I checked just yesterday, there was $1 million in the Senate version of, what was it, 463, 483? Whatever it was.
In the budget. 493, the budget.
Yeah, there was $1 million in that.
In the Senate version.
Yeah.
Oh, but not in what we passed.
Not in what we passed.
Right. Right.
$1 million in the Senate version did not survive reconciliation.
Okay. I want to remove this from the budget. Yeah, all right. So the money's been all over the place. But I'm not seeing there being any language. We usually say something about a contingent upon funds being.
Yeah, I never got that directive.
Yeah. Right, and I figured that there'd be money in here and we'd be asking you to strip out the money and give you that directive as part of now we have multiple amendments.
I don't have that directive, I never got it, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. So my plan had been to strip the money out, have the contingency language, get it over to the Senate, because they haven't seen the policy changes. And ultimately, the money will get decided probably in the committee of conference of the budget at the end of the year. So that's my plan. Assuming we voted out of committee and we voted out of the House, that it just goes there. But that we're not committing to any money, but we're getting the policy and all of that. We're not voting today, obviously. We're not in session, so we can't vote. We need an amendment. Rep. Manning is hopefully still on Zoom. She has an amendment also. And you've seen that amendment. Maybe you wrote the amendment. Okay, so if Rep. Manning is there, maybe she can tell us about the amendment.
There is a fiscal note for the version 3.2, which you have in front of you.
Which one's 3.2? Is that the one that came out of?
Just reviewed.
Okay,
And then version 4.2 will be the.
would be with all the amendments, right? You posted the fiscal note. Okay, so we can take a look at that as well. But why don't we get Rep. Manning on? And she can tell us about her amendment, which also capped out.
Hi, are you ready for me?
Yes, we are. Thanks for your patience and for coming today.
Thank you for having me and inviting me, and I will be brief because I know we're over time already. So I was able to listen to your conversation, and we had a similar conversation about making sure that funds weren't double dipped, and that there were appropriate gates, I guess, set on the money. And so working with advocates, we just made a modification to the section that Michael O'Grady referenced, and I don't see it up on the screen, but I have it on mine somewhere. And
633, I don't know what section that is.
section B.
It's on your committee's website.
Right.
Yep.
So it's on
It
page 4 of the side by side. It's 4633.
Well,
And
that's
so-
right, but that's not the language in Representative Graham's amendment.
Right, but that's the section she's referring to that would be amended.
Yes.
So in section B, there are 4 areas that the secretary should develop the application for. And we added a 5th, and it was a list of any state grants or loans received for the purpose of farm or forestry operation business in the past 5 years, to include amount, source, and purpose of funding received. And this is to do a couple of things. Often we have businesses that we're incubating because it's a business in an area that we deem vital, we think is very important. And so we want to make sure that those businesses are recognized. But also if it's a business that's on life support, for lack of a better, that needs to be known as well, because again, there's limited funding here. And we want to make sure that businesses get the support that they need when they need it. And so that was our compromise, to come up with a way for the secretary and the committee to understand who would be getting the money. Commerce, we want our small businesses to be successful. We're really working, as best we can to put those supports in place. And so we believe that this is an important program. However, we want to make sure that it's spent appropriately.
Okay, so there was you just added number 3 and the other
Correct.
4 were the same. Okay.
No, thank you, Representative. Can you just, what strikes me is just a little off here, or just help me understand. So if I have a farm and I have made applications for grant programs 5 years previous to any climate related weather event that hurt my farm, what's the relevance of that to the damage that was done and what I'm applying for?
It may not be relevant to the damage, but I think it's important for the state to understand where state money is going. And so that was the question. There are safeguards in the bill to not double dip for the same damage. It's also important when you're making a determination on who gets money to understand where else they have gotten money and how much money they have gotten for those things. So for example, if there's a business that has gotten a business development grant in an area, so it was already deemed valuable to that area because it got this business development grant and is now having issues with weather in that area, it's important to take that into account, and that might move that business higher up on the funding decisions. If there's a business that has had issues with weather for the last 3 years, it might also be important to take that into account because perhaps it's not located in a place that is sustainable any longer. So it's that kind of information that we were trying to gather for the secretary and the committee to make these decisions.
So would Mike, when Mike was explaining the bill, he clarified that there weren't points. Like this is a relief fund. So this is, and I'm just asking because it's new. This seems to me to be points. The way that you just explained it, where a funding decision on damages done or loss of crops done would depend on whether or not they received previous funding before. And previous funding in agriculture is hit or miss with anything else. There's always been very limited amount of money available to farms through the USDA or even through the COVID relief. So I'm just curious, was this something that would allow the decision makers to determine whether or not the farm or the operation would be viable after receiving these funds?
So to go to your question about points, that's a decision for the committee to figure out how they want to use the data, but not having access to the data is a possibility if this isn't in the language. And if they don't have information, it's harder to make a good decision. And so that's what this is about. It's about making it easier to gather information when you're making financial decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Rep. Brandy? So in terms of process, she and I have spoken, and the options for this amendment are that we can just do it as part of our larger amendment, whatever, all the pieces of the amendment, if we agree with it, or Rep. Branning can do it on the floor once it gets to the floor and leaves our committee gets to the floor. Is that right? Those are our two options. And,
yes.
And Rep. Branning, you said you were okay with us doing it if you.
I am fully comfortable with you all doing this. I asked the question, and sometimes when you're the one who asks the question, you are volunteered to
Yes.
do the work. And so we had many conversations, committee members, and I was volunteered.
Great, okay. Thank you. So, we're gonna have, assuming we're gonna get this passed out, which won't be today, we're gonna need a committee amendment. Would people generally be comfortable just adding, Rep. Granning's amendment into what we're doing?
I'm not,
You're
I
not.
think I see it right. Yeah, first.
I don't have it in writing.
The
So
amendment.
you don't wanna have the number 3 in. The rest are already in.
The rest are already in there, and my reading from quickly looking at it is that there is already a protection against double dipping for the same problem. And I'm not certain that just because someone received funding before for some other purpose related to their farm, not whether, is a reason for giving them lower priority on this particular application.
Right, so I think they were doing it as information gathering, not you get a demerit if you've gotten other money. But yeah, I can see how it could also be interpreted that way. We don't know anything about it before.
Right.
So, John,
So with this, so Edie, just to clarify, so would this be actually part of the application? Because folks have to fill out an application. There'd be a list of things they need to include for information about their operation to begin with. So do we need this in there as an amendment? I'm just asking because I don't know. Obviously haven't been involved in the long conversations you've had in committee about this to make sure the money is being used in the, proper manner.
Yep. Sorry, are you asking me or are you asking Ledge Council?
I'm asking you.
I think that could be part of that, or it might not have to be, right? It might just make it easier for the committee to gather that information that's making the decision. But again, this, the advocates are on board with this, so that was important also.
I guess I'm only just asking here too, just from administrative point of view here, once they get the application, they have 15 days to move this around. So it would be behoove us to have whatever needs to be in the application to be there.
It is currently,
Yeah,
In the application.
it's in, yeah.
that's kind of the gist of my question here.
And Edie, I believe the Agriculture Committee supports this amendment. Maybe this is a question for David, but I believe that the Agriculture Committee voted unanimously on accepting this amendment. Is that right?
That is correct.
so the advocates have agreed to it and the policy committee is agreeing.
Yep.
We don't have unanimity at the moment in our committee on that. So I think what I'd like to do is tentatively put it in our amendment, which we will have to vote on. And if it turns out that we need to take it out, then we can take it out. But why don't we just start with it in for the moment, and then that's not our final amendment, we're going to change that amendment. And take it out. So that gives everybody a chance to do their other due diligence to make sure that they're either comfortable or not comfortable. So I think we have whatever codification you need in the amendment. We have this.
Striking climate,
Striking the word climate.
and then there were some cross references in the member terms that need to be corrected.
Okay.
The changes.
And
To the date and the
date
effective.
changes. I also think.
And the name of the bill.
I also think we need to do something about that it's contingent on town funding. That whatever that language is, we should have that in here. And did you all in Ledge Council, when I talked to Bryn at the end of last year, at one point I suggested maybe we have a universal kind of way that we say that, so every person in Ledge Council could just say, oh yeah, we'll just pull that down and copy and paste. So
I think we got to that in Senate approves
Okay.
towards the end of last year, but I will double check.
Okay, whatever it works. So let's put those in. Rep. Granning.
Sorry, there was one thing I didn't look at my notes while I was talking to you, and what I have in my notes is unintended outcomes. And if we set this up as a program where folks who don't have insurance coverage can get money here, we don't want to incentivize this to be used as insurance. And so that was the other reason to put that
Okay.
in there as a, have you been getting money from this long-term ongoing?
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So.
So we'll put it in, but you maybe need to be prepared to present it on the floor. So we'll see how all that goes for now. We're now running late. I'm glad we had this extra time. Are we good, Mike? We have.
I'm good.
Okay, so we'll get you back the first or second week of January, and discuss this all then.
And could I introduce Bradley Showman, who is a new legislative council attorney? He's going to be working on agriculture and forestry
Great.
and Elcar. That's
Oh,
what.
great. I bet you're happy about that.
It's
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And we need to get DPS in. They're coming. Perfect. They have a hard stop at 4, so ask questions judiciously.
I have a hard stop at 4 too. But I have a hard stop at 4.
Yeah. 5 minutes.
No.
25 minutes.
I have no idea.
Can we have this there? We got 2 over here. Jeff, there. Got both chairs there. Before each other. Good, perfect.
Thanks for your patience. We had all kinds of extra time and then we didn't.
We came early. Yeah, you might have extra
I
time.
know.
That's all right.
The way it goes.
So have
So
to wait, we're used to it.
welcome if you want to introduce yourselves and take it away for us, please.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Jennifer Morrison. I'm the Commissioner of Public Safety, and I'm joined here today by Deputy Commissioner Dan Batesy.
Good afternoon.
Colonel Matthew Birmingham is the Director of the Division of State Police. Director Richard Hollenbeck, who is the Director of the Division of Finance and Management, Finance and Administration. And Director Jeffrey Wallen, who is the Director of the Vermont Crime Information Center.
All right, well, welcome all of you. Great. Okay, so should we, we have the big spreadsheet that Commissioner Gresham gave us, so I imagine that's all. We have a separate one. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. For the record, Rick Hollenbeck, Director of Finance and Administration of Public Safety. With the Chair's permission, I'm going to go just slightly out of order since the Colonel has a hard stop. I'm going to just jump down one page to get to State Police. Mouse with me. There we go. Okay. Actually, it's on the same page. I apologize. So looking at the Vermont State Police appropriation.
Is this B209?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's B209. The overtime line item is the only thing that we're looking for a budget adjustment on. This is our projected line item shortfall for fiscal 26. Cost increase is driven by the reclassification of troopers. And about worth of it to maintain proper staffing in the public safety answering points, or as we call them PSAPs, where the dispatchers work. And just over 100,000 of it is supporting the patrols that state police are performing in Burlington.
So that's a lot. So the request for reclassification has created overtime?
No, it is increased the rate. So
Their base rate, which
Right.
is driving a higher
Okay.
amount of
Right.
overtime expenditure.
gotcha.
Yeah. And then the PSAPs are part of. So how much overtime do people get? I mean, it's a lot of money to be spending on overtime, no matter what your rate is. Just what's happening that's
So-
causing out the overtime.
So Matt can speak in details to this, but in the PSAP, some of the overtime is being driven by the fact that they now work 12-hour shifts, which means that 4 of those hours are technically overtime hours. Staffing is the short answer to your question, both for troopers and in some cases in the PSAPs. I think if you recall the 2021 and 2022, we were in the same boat, and that overtime was driven by a different line within our overtime, which is about criminal investigations when we were having all the shootings and all the murders related to the drug trade, right? So there's different things that drive the amount of overtime that the state police have to work every year. In this circumstance, the criminal investigation line is only 6%, 5.5%, 6% of this total 800 plus ask. Shift coverage to cover our obligations to police the state is approximately 11.5% this year. 25% is driven by the overtime in the public safety answering points in order to provide the amount of people needed to answer the call volume that's coming into those PSAPs. And then that's basically the story, is it's staffing to keep the right amount of people in the right seats to handle the workload.
So wouldn't it be less expensive to hire a full-time person instead of pay overtime in the
We
PSAPs?
can't, well, we can't. We've been trying to hire troopers for, we've had a significant loss in numbers. We've converted a dozen positions from sworn trooper positions to civilian positions to do the work that troopers were doing. And we see light at the end of the tunnel. We've been having double-digit recruitment classes for the last 3 classes. But you have to remember that we have to also keep up with the attrition through retirements and people who separate or go to other state agencies or, you know, what have you. So we're slowly improving the number. We're down to approximately 50 vacancies right now.
Well, those aren't all in the PSAPs. I was just
Oh,
talking
I'm
about the
sorry.
PSAPs, which you said,
Sure.
they were 12-hour shifts.
Sure.
And so the 4 hours is overtime. And if you keep having that, wouldn't it be, if you hired another person, wouldn't that be less expensive?
In one of the PSAPs, we historically have been unable to hire to full staffing. We historically are carrying between 6 and 10 vacancies in one of the PSAPs. In the other PSAP, we maintain relatively full coverage, although it's a bit of a revolving door. We're generally between 1 and 3 vacancies.
Okay.
So,
John, you had a question?
Yeah, just so I understand the vacancy piece, you have 50 total vacancies, and how many of those are troopers?
those are the number of trooper
That's all,
vacancies
that's all.
we have. That's, I misunderstood
Okay,
the
that's all.
line she was talking
Sure,
about, the piece of
understood that.
overtime request. So last year when we sat here before you, we would have told you we had 324 authorized positions. We now have 312 or 14, from 335. So we had 335. We have civilianized 12 positions. So we now have 323 trooper positions. Of those, 50 are vacant currently. So
Thank you.
that puts a lot of pressure to cover
Sure.
the amount of work.
Yeah,
It
well,
has to
from
be.
last year, we
And-
only had quite a few vacancies, but we had.
We were in this low 60s last year at this time.
So it's an improvement a little bit. When you what does it mean to civilianize? Why do you do that? Why would?
So if we identify that we can't hire people, but there's work that we take a deep look at and determine that somebody not carrying a badge and a gun could do, for instance, we flipped what used to be a detective position to a civilian investigator for cold cases. So they can do a lot of work that doesn't require going out in the community and arresting people or writing affidavits of probable cause. And they're able to then, when they get to the point of needing to make an arrest, they partner with a detective to present the case to the prosecutor. Another example of that would be, what are some of those? A couple of them, sure.
Yeah, so for the record, Matt Birmingham, I'm the director of the state police. We have civilianized as a necessity because we have not been able to hire fast enough. So there's 2 issues: hire qualified candidates to be troopers, because we have a very rigorous screening process and high standards, which we're not willing to compromise. And I think we would all appreciate that we not put the wrong people in the uniform. And then we have a lagging training. It's about 6 months to 8 months before they're actually become, able to be utilized to cover shifts. That lag is substantial, and it creates a huge gap in time that we can't utilize them on the ground. Because our vacancies became so high, since 2019, we've had a net loss of state troopers every year until last year. Until this year, we finally were able to maintain. So in that time, though, we went from about 20 vacancies and at a high of almost 70. So we really hit rock bottom last year. And we had to, the workload is increasing, it's not decreasing. So we had to find ways to manage the workload. In a lot of areas, we did that as in technology. A lot of our technology stuff, depending on whether it's technology we use during our job or technology we use to conduct investigations, that's all been civilianized. That you don't need sworn troopers doing technology. In fact, it's better they don't. For the record. Mental health, mental health. We have an embedded mental health program. The director of that was just one position. The Vermont Intelligence Center, is now all civilian employees. They used to have sworn troopers inside the Vermont Intelligence Center, and that is not the case anymore. A cold case, as the commissioner mentioned, the victim services unit. So our victim services unit now has expanded, and we've converted sworn positions to expand that unit as well.
Thank you. Appreciate the education.
Just quickly, your pool of recruitment pool, I know it's had gone downhill. Is it, you see any recovery at all?
Yes, we're turning a corner. So just to give you an example, in 2019, we had about 800 plus applicants for, every year. Last year we had 260. So it's dropped almost 80%. It's dropped a lot in terms of the number of people applying, and then of the number of people applying, we only hire between 6 and 8%. So when you're hiring 6 and 8% of 300, you only are getting 5 or 6 a class. We can't sustain that because we have an attrition rate of about 30 a year between retirements and graduates. And so we were losing every year for the last 6 years. And we finally turned the corner, and people are applying again. We're seeing good quality applicants. To the commissioner's point, our last 2 classes have been in the mid-teens. 14 just graduated. We're likely going to have 17 starting in January. So those are robust, solid numbers. And so we're coming around, but it's going to take a few years to get out of that because of the delay in training. I mean, so these 14 that just graduated won't even be available for shifts until March. The 17, if we hire 17 in January, won't be available until September. So there's a long lag in their ability to be out of the
Coming out of military?
A lot are, we're heavily recruiting out of the military. We have troopers and our recruiters go to military bases and centers all over the country.
Thanks. Thank you. So I think we've got an explanation of B209. There's 2 other sections that we are changing.
Let the girl go. Are you done? Is everybody happy? Yes.
No, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the rest of you were okay.
Yes.
All right.
Great, so we'll skip back up to page 8 to discuss our indirect cost rate. You'll see the 2 line items that add up to 760,000. The line items are really not important. This is a fund shortfall. These are just the line items we chose. It's a projected revenue shortfall in our interdepartmental fund, which is used as a cost center for our indirect cost rate. I did provide the committee with a handout that did work very cost rate, very direct rate, but basically what it is it's a ratio of our direct and indirect costs. Direct cost is something that is directly attributable to a specific program, like a trooper on the road. An example of an indirect cost would be somebody like the commissioner or myself, where the commissioner oversees the entirety of public safety. You couldn't necessarily divide our time as to what it costs to run each program.
It's sort of like overhead.
Exactly. Yeah. So the rate is developed by DPS administration staff. It's approved federally by our cognizant agency, which is FEMA. And we draw revenue at the approved rate based on actual costs from federal grants, interdepartmental grants, and our special funds. The funds we draw are spent on staffing costs and internal service fees out of the administration appropriation.
So that basically the indirect costs will cover the true overhead. Correct. You're able to pull out of those grants in terms of the indirect is not sufficient to cover
Exactly.
Administrations.
Exactly. Some of these grants are capped as to what we can draw indirects, like a lot of the Justice, Department of Justice grants capped at 10%, whereas our rate our rates fluctuated between like 15 and 27%. It tends to be, it's different every year. And the rate is not really the end all be all as to what we can draw, because sometimes we've had a slightly lower rate, but we've drawn more just because we have grants, a lot more grants, like if public assistance has a lot of disasters, we can draw a significant amount of money on that grant program. So it fluctuates. It's really a difficult thing to predict.
But it's been insufficient, basically.
For the past few years, as the rate started out, we started this back in 2012, and we had a decent carry forward or available cash balance in that fund until probably 2 budget cycles ago is where we noticed. And then that's why we came in for a budget adjustment on this same thing last year, because it was going to, for the first time, dip into the negative.
So have you ever budgeted to have a general fund line item for additional administrative costs?
Well,
Do you anticipate doing that?
yeah, I can speak to that better after we get the governor's recommend for our budget.
But in the past, have you done that? Because we don't work with it. Not future, but in the past, have you budgeted sufficient to cover when you know there's a shortfall? I guess you haven't had to because you've had all carry forward.
Exactly, and we do have general funds, as you can see, our appropriation, is starting out at 7.6 million, and we're looking for it to go to 8.39. So we do have general funds,
Yeah.
just not.
It hasn't been enough.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
this isn't the only place where this has been happening in state government, and so I will say again that we would like to see it, we don't want to use budget adjustment as a budgeting tool because you're told, and this isn't necessarily for you, but it's for everybody, because you're told you have to get in with a certain amount, so you cut it down, and then you say, well, we'll figure it out at budget adjustment, and then we end up just paying all the money back instead of if we'd had the right budget to begin with, or closer to the right. It's just sort of a general statement I'm making here, but you guys are falling under that category. You're not the only ones. So we'll look forward to seeing what happens in FY 27.
Absolutely.
Any more questions on that section from folks? Okay,
Great, so I am going to, without a mouse, make every attempt to get to the next page without going past it. All right. So in criminal justice services,
B210.
thank you. D210, more specifically, this is specific to the Vermont Crime Information Center, which is one of 2 divisions that falls under the criminal justice services appropriation. You see the line item is other contracts and third-party services for 570,000. So that increase is due to our contract with the Computer Project of Illinois for the DPS message switch, which the message switch facilitates the electronic transmission and receipt of restricted data to authorized users, basically law enforcement data and law enforcement users. Commissioner, correct me if I'm off on that. The existing hardware was past end of life, leading to an inability to get parts and to maintain the system and apply required security patches and updates. So it was, decision was made to move this to a cloud environment as opposed to the physical environment that we had to try to replicate that physical environment because we couldn't continue to maintain it. And so
So this is all of the entirety of the criminal justice information that is used by far more than just sworn police officers. It's used by corrections, the courts, DCF, lots of things. And as Rick mentioned, the architecture of the information system was far beyond end of life. And this was a necessary change. And it cost $570,000.
good job.
So is that an increase? So, I mean, obviously you knew this was gonna happen. You had to know it was gonna happen. So Is this the total amount for this, or is this in addition? During the contracting process, did you find that it cost you more?
This is a one-time upgrade. We actually have maintenance fees on top of that are budgeted in our special fund. Initially, when we were looking at doing this, I think around fiscal 23, it was my recollection is roughly about half of that. So it is significantly more than we thought. And we'll get into this a little bit later when we talk about the special funds, which is our final ask. The criminal history record check fund, where we've been covering this contract, was once quite healthy and has been dwindling, and is now in the general funds for support.
Mike?
I guess I just want to be clear, this is where information is held that our record checks are pulled from. Is that?
That's all places we can.
You just pull the chair over, whatever.
For the record, my name is Jeffrey Wallen, and I'm the director of the Vermont Crime Information Center. And to your question, yes, it is one of the systems that holds criminal history data. It does a lot of other things as well. This is a integrated system, so it's also what makes warrants, missing persons available across the country, and allows law enforcement and criminal justice agencies in Vermont to know that that vehicle they just pulled over from Tennessee, my home state, is stolen, for example. So it does a lot of different things. It's not just a single application that resides there.
And is this upgrade going to change any of our actual functionality? And what I mean by that is I hear a lot about the length of time that it takes to get record checks in Vermont. And so I wasn't sure if this affects any of the actual systems of functionality.
So as far as the actual how work is processed, no, it doesn't actually interact with that. The systems we were using, and to build upon what the commissioner mentioned, and we were having to, our digital services colleagues were having to go on eBay to try to buy parts for some of the equipment that old, which didn't work. And so
It's not really secure.
I'm
sorry to hear that.
It's not a winning friend. It just simply became unsustainable. And when we looked at different ways to go about that, moving to a cloud environment was the most cost-effective way, rather than buying all the digital equipment. It was one cost-effective way to go about doing it. It also required some updates to the system, and I'm not a programmer, and I'm not going to pretend to speak about different programming languages and things, but it moved it into a more modern application. So when we do that, such as things that would improve the process or allow us to automate more things, we're in a better position to do that, but we still have work to do on that front. We couldn't have done that with our old system. We would have been a complete non-starter. Now we're in a much better position as we move forward to continue to look at and have those options available. But this in itself is not going to make things go more quickly. It's just going to make sure that they keep happening.
So,
Just to be clear, when you did last year's budget, you didn't know this was going to be happening.
no, we knew the message from Chad being in place. We've known that for 2-3 years. But the time between when we knew the cost until the time of execution, things change in cost.
Yeah, but you didn't budget anything for it at all in the budget.
Rick, did we budget for it last year?
We did not budget for it last year. There was an amount in 23
But nothing for FY 26.
in special funds though, so it didn't get, wasn't rebudgeted. And I think that was the around 262,000. I can't find the number, but it wasn't quite as expensive as.
But you were planning to use special funds for that.
Exactly, the special funds were healthy. I mean, skipping down to that.
Was that for last year, for FY 26, or were you talking about a few years ago?
I'm talking about a few years ago.
Okay, so I'm thinking of just FY 26 budget. So you budgeted nothing for this program, even though you knew it was coming, and I know you didn't know the amount, but you didn't budget anything, you didn't miss placeholder, you just did nothing. Okay.
I think you commented that this system is used by other agencies as well. Is that true? And if that's true, do they help share in the costs of this process?
So this is an enterprise-wide solution. A lot of the data and day-to-day interaction is within BCIC staff, but every law enforcement and criminal justice agency in the state interact with this system every day. Every piece of DMV data that goes out goes through this system as well. Currently, we handle the majority of the costs. I don't want to say all of them because I'm not quite the budget guru that Rick is, but the majority of the costs are currently handled within DPS.
That's not uncommon. So this, if you think about this project, it's like a hub that moves information. It's not any one database, right? But there are many solutions that we pay for in there, it's in their entirety for every user in the state, whether they're a state employee or not.
Right.
And when he talks about criminal justice agencies, that's not necessarily a law enforcement agency. It's people who have the authority to access this level of information for official purposes. So as I said, it can be people who do screenings for childcare providers, folks over at DCF, folks who are working to determine if somebody can work with a vulnerable adult, corrections staff, certain other people who are authorized users. But it is not uncommon that the entirety of these, the upkeep and the payment of these systems comes to DPS.
To you, right. I was just wondering if there was a significant enough part that maybe that DMV uses or the judiciary uses that we can charge 10%, we can charge you 2%, you only have to pay 80%. But if that's not discreet enough to figure that out, then
I'm not aware that that's ever been the payment scheme, but
all right.
we're the hub of it and we're happy to do the work required to get it healthy again. So we'll keep money.
Yeah. Okay, and then you said you had a special fund, was that the one, that was a?
Yes, if you, if I scroll all the way to the bottom of this, it's a transfer. So it doesn't fit in with the crosswalk. I did the complete crosswalk, so you would see the impact on the entire budget, all the numbers would add up. At the very bottom, the last 4 lines, show you the section of the bill where the fund transfer is. It's 1.059. General fund infusion into the criminal history record check fund, which is the amount of our projected deficit. The revenue is about 2.3 million annually, and the budget as passed in 26 is just under 3.4 million. BCIC has no, Vermont Crime Information Center has no appropriated general funds for fiscal 26, and the criminal history record check fund basically covers all their staffing costs and the majority of their contract and operating. And we do have some federal funds and special, but that for fingerprints, but that's all, for specific things. The bulk of their base funding source is the criminal history record check fund. And as I mentioned before, that it was one time healthy. In fiscal 22, our ending balance was $2.9 million. And that was actually our budgeted amount in fiscal 22, $2.9 million. So it dwindled to 1.8 at the end of 23, and then by 2024 we ended with 342,000, ending 25 with a slight deficit of 44,000.
So does this just bring the balance to zero?
Yes.
And then how much is actually typically being added to it each year?
It varies, but going forward, that 3.4 million, what should be added would be just any contractual needs like the message switch and salaries and benefits.
Are added into the fund?
Oh, I'm
How
sorry.
does the fund get filled again besides us giving you $1 million from general?
I'm sorry, I answered the question as to budget, not fund. So the criminal history record check fund is for online Vermont criminal conviction reports that anyone can basically plug in the information and pay, I think the fee is $30 and get the report. And that revenue was at one time in fiscal 21 data when we were building 23. The growth rate was 33.26 and the revenue was 2.6 million. So we anticipated that to continue, but it did not. The growth rate dropped to 19.42 and 22. And from there, it took a dive, went down almost 5%, and then it went down 19%. So it's down 3.7% in 25. So it's kind of stabilizing, but it's still.
What does that mean in dollars?
We're looking at basically 2.3
$4 million in revenue to support a $3.4 million needed budget. So
Every
basically,
year.
yeah, so basically $1 million short.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So, cause, what's the cause of the decline?
Fewer people are paying for copies of criminal record checks, and that could be because there's other ways to do it over the internet that don't cost you $30 to cull open source data from courthouses. Jeff probably has other theories as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. The majority of the entities that run these name and date of birth conviction checks are housing or employment. Typically, they're out-of-state entities that handle this. And so someone's saying they lived in Vermont, so they're looking to see if they have a Vermont conviction, so it's a commercial transaction. I've not been to, in my 15 years, been able to figure out any rhyme or reason to the fluctuations that exist. It doesn't appear to be tied to micro or macroeconomic trends. It just does fluctuate. We saw, to Rick's point, it spiked after COVID for reasons that, again, I cannot even begin to speculate on, but it has returned to its prior growth level and prior level. So it did throw some challenges our way as far as budgeting, because you don't want to under, but you want to over either. If I had stood out on the street and put a sandwich board on, it might help a smidge, but only not much on that.
So,
For instance, yeah, happens.
so multiple factors are not predictable.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it seems to me like going forward, we have a lot of special funds that are underfunded, and then we end up backfilling with general funds, which seems to me that we have to start thinking about different ways. Maybe the special fund isn't the way to go anymore. You know, maybe it all goes into general fund and then we pay for, just pay for it.
We're open to your feedback, and we would obviously work that through.
Yeah, so I'm just sort of brainstorming here, but you're not the only place where there's needs to backfill special funds, because when they were set up, whatever the situation was then is not what it is now.
That has been my experience over the last 4 budget cycles.
Yes.
And that 1 or 2 unexpected large expenditures throws it completely out of whack, not just for that year, but the cascading
Oh,
effect.
sure, exactly. So I think there's a better way to do all this, which is not just about your department. So. Okay, were those all the things that you had on there?
Yes.
Okay, and this is yours, but.
Yes, this is mine.
Good, Marty's got this.
I will be in touch.
Any
Marty, the
other?
new gym.
Yes.
Yes, well, we're looking forward to working with you. We certainly had a long and lovely relationship with Representative Harris.
Yes, sure.
Absolutely terrific.
Great. So, no more questions from the committee. I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays.
Same to you. So committee, I have a couple of notes here. This was our last one. Thank you all for hanging in there for 2 days, getting in shape for January. If your assignment while we're gone, until we meet in January, is get familiar with the spreadsheet and the language that Adam sent yesterday, so that we understand what's in there. If you haven't connected with your budget people, it's maybe hard over the holidays, but if there's people you can chat with that you think that you need to after hearing everything the last 2 days, please do that. The session begins at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, January 6th. We will not meet before then. We will not have any 9 o'clock meetings before then. So it'll be 10 o'clock on the floor. There'll be caucuses. We'll meet again in the afternoon. The second week of the session, we'll all go to a sexual harassment prevention training as required. Don't know what day that is yet. That Friday of the second week, January 16th, I have now learned that's the emergency board is going to meet, 10 a.m. on that Friday, the 16th. In the afternoon, we're going to have a joint hearing with House Ways and Means and have Tom Pavette come. We'll probably meet in room 11, have both committees there so he can present and we can chat about that. And then backing up, the 7th is the governor's budget, state of the state, the day after we get here. So right Wednesday is the state of the state, the 7th. And then 2 weeks later, on the 20th, is the budget. So we will have Adam come in that afternoon after we've heard we'll actually have him come in for a little bit, probably. The governor will speak at 2, and then we'll have him come in and talk for, maybe half an hour. And we'll launch into the budget then.
We're starting on this on the 14th.
We will see whether we're going to start on Monday for budget adjustment or not. if we don't have to, I would be very happy to have a ski day or whatever. So, I mean, we've gotten a head start on budget adjustment. And if we don't need to, I'd rather not have you all have to. So, and we won't meet on the 19th because that's a federal holiday of January. So.
January.
Holiday, January 19th. That's what MLK Day is, on the 19th of January.
Okay.
So we will not be meeting on that day.
That's Friday.
That's a Monday.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
It's 26.
Yeah.
So any other questions, we're kind of clear on what we're going to be doing and what has to be done? Anyway, great job, everybody.